because there's so much that I could talk about. Definitely let me know if there's like something specific. Oh, like panels, I'm struggling and writing because it's kind of chaotic right now in my writing story. Okay. Okay. Let's see. What exactly with the panels? What is the struggle with the panels specifically? Like, are you talking about like the actual paneling of like the structure of the panels, or like the art part of the panels? Like, what exactly with the panels? The structuring of the panels? Okay. Are you in romance? Are you in action? What's your genre? What's your genre? Because that really will um make a difference with action and drama. Okay, well, if you have any action, I'm gonna show you a creator called Brendan Chen, his comics, because they're superb examples of how to panel anything with action and suspense and things like that. Let me see if I can find him in here. He's actually an original creator, so he's gonna be on the other side. Here he is. Let's see. Let's do this one. I like this one. I think I went through this episode before. Yeah. So this is just Webtoon, but the app that I use is different. It's called Lemoon. It's Lemoon. So yeah.
You're still alive?
Yeah, what you got?
Okay. I want candy.
Okay. Go on, put it away. You can go outside for a little bit. Where's your watch?
I don't want to go outside. Mom was hot.
Okay,
and I was like outside for like 700 hours.
I'm gonna get a water and then go watch TV for a little bit. Okay, so Brendan Chen is an original creator. Thank you, Marinetta. Yeah.
Did you see Iverson?
No.
He like spammed the hearts and then he gave you like 500 likes of the hearts.
What?
Like Iverson. He was like.
What do you mean? He was on my live?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I asked him if he could go on your live because I saw you live when I was in Discord. And then he was just randomly spamming the hearts.
Why does he have TikTok?
Because he can. I don't know why he does.
I don't want him on my TikTok.
But Mama, I just said.
Okay, thank you.
He got you to 500.
Thank you. But listen, my stuff is not for you, remember?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. I love you.
Greatest dudes behind them.
Okay, go on, because I'm on live right now. Thank you. Go watch TV. Okay. So yeah, on Lemoon you do need to have coins to unlock some of the episodes. Just depends on the creator and how they set everything up. Is this for me? Thank you. Cute. So it just depends on the creator and how they did their stuff. Can you shut my door? You guys want to see what my son just gave me? Super cute. He just gave me this cute little flower. I have a 10-year-old. He just got home from school. But yeah, so it just depends on the creator. Like, I'm not going to speak too much for other people, but for my series, it's the first 5 episodes that are free. And then after that, it is paid after that. Okay, so Brendan Chen is an original creator. He has a lot of action stories, and I kind of went through this episode before on live. I really enjoyed kind of doing like an analysis of his paneling. It was really interesting to me. As a romance creator, the paneling is a lot different. We kind of pace the paneling and show the visuals a little bit different. But essentially the concepts still stayed the same. So one of the things that I noticed that he does really well is portray depth in his panels. And I think that is really important for action because it just makes things feel like it's moving, and also that there's like more going on in the panels. So if you see a lot of these panels, there's a lot of depth. This one not so much, or that one, but in something like this, sort of like almost like an establishing shot, you can see all the way back here. Obviously this is two-dimensional, but the fact that you feel like you can see the layers of the forest just make it feel like it's really kind of like they're moving through the forest. You know what I'm saying? So he shows movement in these very subtle ways that make you feel like things are kind of coming forward and moving in the panels. So even though you're scrolling down, you're reading this panel and it's like, okay, this is sort of the background. Then you have the focus on these characters, so your eyes kind of like drawing this way. And he steps out of the panel, which is important because, again, this is an action comic, so he wants to show and portray movement. The other thing I want you to notice too, as we continue through scrolling through, is how things are going back and forth. How even in this panel, you see there's like a direction in the way that things are kind of like moving with the characters in the background. Not every panel has to be a complete shot of something, so I really like that he steps into nothing, but you understand that obviously it would be the road, right, or the path. But this panel kind of has like a gradient down, and it just shows this right here, which is meant to emphasize whatever is here on this letter. So that's what is showing right here. This was also shown right here, so you already were shown that, so it's not random. Moving on, again, a little bit of the background here, you know, with the trees and things like that, but nothing crazy. And then these kind of panels here, I forget what I called these panels, like supporting panels or something. But if you can see where the background actually starts, it actually starts up here. And then he has these trees kind of transitioning down, and then that's the foreground. This is the background. And then you have this movement here where you can feel like they're coming through the trees. You have this kind of like wind shown here, and then you have her coming at us in this way with some more foreground. So the foreground again adds that depth, which, like I mentioned earlier, is really going to add to the movement and the depth of the panel, like the action of the panel. And then again, we're paying attention to the way that he shows the movement of the actual panel itself. So you have sort of this kind of direction going. So it's like down here. D is here, and now it's coming down, following the character and finishing off. So you get this nice S shape. If you're looking at my finger, you're following the way that my finger is going on this panel. So that's another thing that you can consider is it should be sort of like back and forth. Do you see how it's like back and forth? Like even down through here, it's back and forth. That is super important because of the way that we're reading this through a vertical scrolling experience. The other thing I noticed with him, what he does is, well, with a lot of action like comic creators, they do is have the SFX sort of in the level of the subject. This is Blood System. This is a comic by Brendan Chen. He's an original creator. He's a super big content creator on like social media and things too. He has like a bunch of series and things, but I'm just going through his comic to kind of go through comic paneling because that's what somebody had asked about. So I love this, how the SFX sort of encompasses the subject here. So it really makes it feel like when you're reading it, you're like, oh, okay, this is like the point of action here. So the same thing was done up here where we had the dash. It's like dash, right? But she's in the middle of that. So it could have just been like dash right here, and then you see the girl, but I love how it's like dash. Do you see that? So that's another thing that you can make sure that you do. And he does it like with most of these larger panels here. So it's like splat, and then again, we're going this way. Here's another one where it's like slam, and then this person is in the center of the SFX. Now this is lettering. This is like SFX lettering, but it's still like obviously part of the panel process, like when you're thinking about how you're going to show the characters and, you know, set up the panel itself. So you have slam, and then, you know, you're going down, and then you have some more things here. And again, looking at that depth, so we have background a little bit more in the foreground, and then these, you know, whatever this is, cage or whatever, is more in the foreground. So you have like layers, like the background smoke here, or like the fog here, the trees, the tent, the character, and then the cage. So it's like layers to the way that you're setting up the scene. We see it again here in this panel. This is like a continuous panel here because the background continues on down into the next sort of large sequence. So you have some of these supporting panels. So like I call these like smaller panels like supporting panels. But this is like the main panel here. So you have again like the background, the fog, the cage, the character, and then this person here is in the foreground. So it's like right up on us, you know, to again show like that depth. And then the movement of the panels here is a supporting panel. These are called action lines. So wherever you're going to start to have a lot of movement, these usually accompany it in some way. So you're going to start to see some of these moving on into some of the other panels. And it's just to kind of help to guide your eye to where it's going to be, like where the action is going to be going. Here's another SFX kind of example. So you have stab, and you have stab, and then you have the person in between. I'm going to try to sort of go through some of those panels because I don't want to get restricted or anything here. Here's another example of how the SFX sort of like also kind of goes along the movement of the panel itself. Here's another example of that. I'm gonna kind of try to go through some of this. Some of these are really cool. Like I think this one I really liked before. So you already have the background color as white here. So you have like a supporting panel and then you have it already being white here. So once he comes down to this panel here where it's showing the sword, you already were kind of feeling like this brightness here. And now your eye is sort of like coming down and then you're seeing that this is a sword of some sort, like some lightning sword or something like that. So I love how he uses the space on the panel to really capture your eye and direct you to where he wants you to go. So, and then this part right here, he's like above the guy. So you would probably think, oh, okay, we're like coming down, maybe we're level on the ground. But no, we're actually like up above this guy. So it's such an interesting use of space and like I said, space in the physical space in the story, but then also space on the actual physical panel itself. And then you have some more light here that shows he was moving again. So it's like you see him here, he's swiping down, then we see this light here, and it's actually another movement that he made over here because this guy moves here. And now that your eye obviously knows that this is the sword, now you kind of understand this is the sword. So now you're like, okay, he's holding the sword. He has a lot of these cool effects with light that he does. Very interesting use of light and color in his comics. It pops so much. It feels like an anime. He really does a good job. And it's not even him. He has like a huge team of people that work with him, but whatever it is, his writing or his direction or whatever aspect he has in the story is what I'm talking about here. Here's another example of that SFX. I'm gonna try to like go through these a little bit quicker because it's just to make sure I don't get like I think this is another cool panel. This reminds me a little bit of like Inuyasha, like the wind scar for some reason. I think because of like that curve. But I love this like horizontal panel. And you can do horizontal panels, like even though we're looking at this vertically, you can also do like horizontal panels like this to sort of allow for more movement and immersion into a panel. So it's like instead of having it just be, like this, right? The character's just like, it's like that's all you see, right? Because you're scrolling this way. Having it vertically or having it horizontal in the vertical scroll is really going to allow you to stretch this moment out a little bit more and really kind of, play with the space on the panel. So in my episode 5, I also do something similar where it could have just been a panel of, San and Gia like this, but I extended it so San and Gia are like this, and it just allows you to kind of like scroll past the whole kind of like physical body of the panel that I'm showing. So you get to see like a full body picture of them. So let me know if this is helpful, just kind of like showing you how like an action panel and kind of like with the suspense and the drama and how like, some of the SFX and things can go. Let me know if this is helpful at all. You can kind of check this out yourself. This is on Webtoon, it's free. And he has like a bunch of other stories too. So I would say, with all the people that I've followed and things, I think he is definitely one of the best for action sequences and really understanding what it is that Webtoon wants. Like I said, he's an original creator, so he obviously has a pretty good handle on, what Webtoon is looking for, what the platform and audiences really like to read in this kind of genre. As you can see, he mostly does action type of stuff, like shonen type of things. But yeah, so hopefully that was helpful, at least for the paneling. For writing, we can definitely talk about some writing stuff. So let me know if you have any specific things about writing. We can kind of like chat about it. Hello on YouTube. So that was called Blood System. That was not my comic. That was a comic by Brandon Chen. He's an original creator. I have somebody on TikTok that we're just talking about comics and how to make a comic and things like that. So I was just kind of like breaking down how to make like an action comic and like the paneling process for that. Just some quick tips and things like that. I don't have a action comic yet. I have a couple concepts, but I have nothing created yet. I just have the one series, the romance series. There will be, you know, some scenes and things that might have a little bit of stuff in it, but for the most part, I'm just more of like a romance creator. But I am a writer, and so I like to do analysis on different things. So I'm doing good. How are you? Doing good, doing good. Let me know if you have any other questions. Each of my episodes so far, I kind of just summed it up. I haven't really blended it all together. Okay. What do you think your biggest struggle is with writing the story? Like, is it character development? Is it figuring out the plot? Is it coming up with scenes? Is it dialogue? Like, what exactly is it that you struggle the most with when it comes to the story process? Where can I read it? Blood System you can read on Webtoon, but if you're looking for my story here, When the Silent Bird Sings, you can read it on an app called Lamoon, and that's what I just had up here. It's called Lamoon is the app, and you can get it on App Store, the Apple App Store, or Google Play, and this is the comic. And also there's a lot of gaps in the story so far. How to move forward and create the drama and action I want because I'm stuck on episode 9. Okay. How much of the story have you created? Do you have a full idea of the full story? Do you have like a beginning, middle, and ends? Are you just working on it as it comes? Like, what is your current process that you've been going through? Just so I have a better idea of where you're at. And then I can kind of give you a little bit better advice. I love your animation. Thank you. I have an amazing artist that I work with. He's great. I think the beginning is solid, the middle is hardly planned out, and I have no idea about the end. Okay. So I would say that's probably where most of your problems are going to come from, is not really having a good direction. So like when I work with people, I always suggest to know as much as possible of the whole story as you can. And that doesn't mean that you have to know like all the scenes or anything like that, but you have to know what I call are the key plot points of the story. And this would be really like what the story is doing throughout the whole story. So for my story, it's like I knew at the beginning, like obviously Son and Gia have to get together. I know that there's a couple really important things that have to happen in the middle, and I had an idea of how the story has to end. So without giving too much of that away, but that kind of plot pointing definitely helped me to at least start to understand the direction of the story, right? You might have an idea of how sort of like it's going to go. Yeah. So, and I do know that when you write a story, you should plan out the beginning and the end first. Yeah, 100%. And I'm going to say this only because I've come across so many comic creators that do this where they don't have a clear plan and they start drawing and they start writing and then they get stuck around where you are, like episode 9, 10, 11, 12, and they don't know how to move forward because they didn't really plan out the story too much. And so that's why I am a huge advocate of before you even start, before you even start the story, definitely have a good direction and don't feel pressured to get on the, webtoon or anything and get your story out there, because I've seen more people do that and then not even come back and finish at all in any capacity because they get so discouraged by the feedback that they got, or just the process in general. So I say take your time, like really try to flesh out the writing, because the writing is the most important part of the story. I don't know if you're more of a writer or an artist, but I've have a lot of people that I've worked with that are mostly artists, and they don't understand the importance of writing. They think the art is the most important part, and it's really, really not. Okay, so you're more of an artist. So that's what I'll say. So it's like the art is really important, but I am going to advocate that the writing is the most important part, because for the same reasons that you're talking about right now, you'll get stuck. You won't even be able to draw anymore because you won't have the story solid to have anything to draw, right? So my whole point with that was just to say don't feel obligated or pressured or anything to publicly share the story. You can obviously do whatever you want, but if you feel like you need to draw, or maybe draw like the character designs or something while you're building out the story, definitely do that, or share it to your social media so that way people can like follow you and get to know what you're doing. And you can build up your social medias while you're actually working on the story, and then by the time you launch your story, there will be a bunch of people waiting that have been like following you and waiting to get the story, and you'll have an amazing launch, which is also really important. So let me talk more about this. So if you have a good idea at the beginning, right, you have a solid idea of the way that the story is going to end. Now, when I created this story, I didn't even know, I was like joking about it earlier that I said I didn't even know who she was going to end up with, but I had to make a decision at some point because obviously I had to know the direction. Now, if she ended up with like both of the men, she's not going to, so I'll say this. If she ended up with both of the men, obviously some of these plot points would have had to be different along the way, right? So that's why I said it's so important to at least know what's going to happen at the end, because it can really affect the rest of the stuff here. It's almost like a domino effect. Do you know what I mean? If she ended up with both of the guys, then this would have had to be different, which means that they would have had to make a different decision here, which means that I would have had to add some different foreshadowing here. Do you see what I'm saying? So having a good idea of how that's going to be will help you to be able to write the beginning. And I'll also say this too, that at least for me, like I am super big on foreshadowing and setup. I believe in setting things up to get that payoff. So even in my own story, in the first 5 episodes, I have a lot of stuff that I set up that at some point pretty soon will be paid off in some way. And I would not have been able to do that if I didn't know kind of like the more fine details of the story. So where you're at right now, I would say start to think more about, you can go into some different directions here. You can think about the theme of the story, which is also sort of like the message, like the true meaning of your story can also help you to kind of brainstorm like the direction of the things that need to happen, right? So in my story, I kind of said it earlier, just kind of like summarize the general story in itself, but the story that I'm writing right now is basically about a man who is going to learn how to love again through not only reuniting with his ex, but also through the unconditional love that he gets from his daughter. So that's sort of like, it's not really like the theme, but it's sort of like the direction of the story. So I know everything that he has to go through, San, in my story, sort of has to circle back to that in some way. So if it's like, let me write it. So it's like, I'll put in a different color. So it's like for San, he's going to learn how to love himself and others, and appreciate life through the unconditional love of his ex and his daughter. Okay? So something like that, right? That's the story premise. That's sort of like where we're going to go with the story. Every single thing that I have happen in the story now has to somehow come back to this. So if we go over like the first 5 episodes that I have in the story, obviously nothing is going to be completely paid off right now because we just started the story. However, some of the things I set up in the beginning of the story that will eventually have some sort of conclusion. So relating to this, I was talking earlier about how San's an alcoholic, and you see a little tidbit of that through the first 5 episodes. San also has PTSD. You're gonna see what else in the first 5 episodes? I guess in episode 5-ish, 6-ish, and probably even like episode 2 when we actually kind of get like his feelings about Gia being there. You'll also see that he's avoiding something. He doesn't want to be around Gia. He doesn't want to deal with her. He doesn't want to be reminded of her or anything like that. So he's avoiding his past, right? He's avoiding his past. So how these things all sort of, this has to do with character development too, by the way. This is like more like character arc type stuff that I'm talking about right now. Character art, or whoops, development. But all of these things, since he's the main character, and a lot of the things that happen with him, like I said, have to do with this sort of central theme. A lot of these things are going to come up again later in some way. This is so helpful. Okay, great. Yeah, I love talking about this stuff. So, like, anytime I'm live, just if you want to talk, we can totally go over stuff. But yeah, so he's an alcoholic. This is going to come up a few times until finally, in his character development, he's not an alcoholic anymore. He has PTSD, and then finally, through these different situations, right, through the unconditional love of his ex and his daughter, he's going to eventually be sort of recovering from his PTSD. And then the avoidance problem that he has is his critical flaw in his character, that he avoids everything. He avoids things through the alcoholism, through the alcohol, to cure or cope with the PTSD, right? So eventually he's going to learn that he can't do that anymore. He's going to have to face his past. Knowing this, right? So I want to say this because knowing that, I'll put it a little bit smaller now. Knowing these things about my main character, knowing these things about the message I'm trying to send through this story, which is basically about, like I said, the story of a man who learns to love who learns to love through the unconditional love of his daughter and his ex, learns to love himself. Knowing these things, now when we go back to the beginning, middle, and end of our story, now I can kind of have an idea of how the story should start. Now I kind of have an idea of how the story should end, because if I know that he has these issues and that has to do with the message and the theme of the story, now I can figure out, okay, well, I'm going to show him being at the lowest point that he could be at. He's going to get hit by a car. This is like actually what happens in the story, right? He gets hit by a car, or gets hit by a car. He's going to get hit by a car caused by his alcoholism, and his PTSD and his avoidance of the past. This is the lowest point that I have my character starting at, because now throughout the rest of the story, he can, or he at least should, only be going up from there. This is like the lowest point he could have been at. He almost died. Right? Like it's pretty shitty. So he can only really go up from there, really. Right? So now I know that. So knowing that he can only really go up from here, I should kind of have an idea of how the end of the story should go. Which should be pretty good, right? It should be the opposite. For his character arc, it should be the opposite. It should be that the ending is really good. And it should address these couple things that I was talking about for the message and the theme. At the end of the story, he shouldn't be an alcoholic anymore. He shouldn't have, or at least suffer from PTSD as strongly as he did before. And he shouldn't be wanting to avoid the past anymore. So then you can sit and you can think, okay, well, what does that look like for this character? What does that look like for your character? If you have an action drama story and you know that there's a lot of chaos and drama in the beginning of the story, what does a perfect world look like for your story or for your character? Does it look like peace? There's finally peace between, you know, the warring factions or whatever that you have in your story, or the characters. Are they no longer fighting? What does that look like? Do you know what I mean? And then you can think about, well, what kind of scenarios could I put them in to create that ending? And it doesn't have to be perfect right now, but you just get like the vibe of what that could be like. Do you know what I mean? Oh, I'm just talking about writing. I'm talking about writing, how to write comics and how to create stories and things like that. Okay? So now you have your beginning, now you have your beginning, now you have your end, the vibes of it, right? Because you don't need to know exactly what's going on yet. We're just trying to figure out what your story is. Okay? Once you have that kind of stuff down, now we can talk about character arcs. We can talk about character arcs. We can talk about plot development. We can talk about a lot of the other stuff that goes into this, right? That will really help you to be able to like build out your story. Comics, my friend does those, and I just do the speech and backgrounds. Okay, cool. Yeah. Totally hang out then. We're just chatting about it. I'm just talking about it. From my perspective, from what I've learned, and from being just a writer. So I'm like a writer, right? I'm like writer first. Well, really writer only. I don't draw anything. But I sometimes like come on here, I draw some stuff, but I don't draw anything for the comics. So I'm pretty much just a writer, and so I'm coming from this from a writer's perspective. That's sort of like what I do here. So we got that right, how to do kind of like the beginning. So again, just to recap, sort of look at like the theme and the message of your story. What are you even trying to talk about? Like, what is this story? Why are you making this story? These are kind of questions you can ask yourself. Like, what is it that you want the reader to sort of walk away from at the end of your story? And even if your story is an action drama, there still should be some kind of like core thematic message or something in there that sort of drives the story, right? And then you start to think, who's your main character? Like, who is the vessel that you want the story to sort of be told through, right? So San is the character that I have. It could have been Gia, right? But San is more important because he's the one that's dealing with the PTSD and the pain, and he's the one that really has to go through the healing journey. Whereas Gia just has more of like a reflective kind of arc. She just kind of has to reflect on herself and what she really wants. San is the one that really has some deep work that he has to go through to ultimately get to the end of the story. he's our vessel, right? Or at least he's my vessel in my story. And then, like I said, I figured out where he needs to start from and where he needs to end. And now that's going to drive the rest of the story that we're going to talk about. Sorry, but may I ask an artist question? Sure. What's up? You can ask your question. I'm gonna keep chatting about this part here. So there's two things that I think are like really, really important when it comes to story development that I really like to focus on. And one of them is character development. These are things I really like to focus on: character development and plot development. And you might think that these things are separate, but they're actually the same. They're not the same, but they're things that you can do at the same time. And they really help to drive one another. So I like to think of things like an arc. Let me know what your question is too, Hugh. Is it true all artists use more than one color, marker, pencil to color a drawing, like, for example, Gojo? Is it true that we use more than one color? What do you mean? Yes. Right? Because, like, there's lots of colors that go into an illustration. So, is that what you mean? Or what do you mean? Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it depends on, like, the level of rendering. Like, like some people do, like, well, there's, like, base colors, right? So, like, the base color is, like, usually one color. It's also called, like, flat colors. It's usually like one color. I'll show you like an example on an illustration for me. So this is some example of like rendering that I've done. So you can see that there's depth in the way that I did the skin here. Very loosely rendered this, but I started with like the base color, which is just the skin tone, and then I added some shadows for depth, and to also accentuate the muscles and things, and then also some highlights to show where it would be raised, like where the body would be raised, or like the muscles and things would be raised, to show like the sloping of the muscles and things. So yeah. So that's kind of like what you do if you do like that kind of rendering. Otherwise, you can just do like what's called like flat color rendering, and that's just usually like one color. Like this is another example of like multi-dimensional rendering. It's not like the best kind of rendering, but you can see like there's just a lot of depth and lighting and things that kind of go into it. So yeah, that's kind of like what you do. I mean, you can also see it like in his hair here pretty well, like how I had to add the darker shades to add a little bit of depth to his hair. Otherwise, this is just the flat color there. So hopefully that's helpful or answers your question. Yeah, so let's go into this. Let's talk about character development and plot development a little bit. The reflection kind, I really kind of want to learn. I really want to learn that. Yeah. I'm still learning a lot about how to do all that too. But yeah, no, you're fine. So like I said, we talked a little bit about sort of like how to sort of conceptualize the story, right? You don't even really need to know the middle yet, but if you know where you start and you know where you end, now we can sort of talk about the character development and the plot development. And these two things are going to help you to flesh out the middle. The middle is like what everybody hates. Everybody hates doing the middle because it's so hard. There's so much that has to happen. And that's really where like you sitting and really thinking about your story is going to help. So you can sort of like figure out where the story is actually going to go. I can't handle it because your nails look so beautiful, though the black is nice. Okay, thank you. These are actually blue. They're like a really pretty kind of like shiny ombre blue situation, like glittery blue. But yeah, I got them on TikTok actually. If you search for like Nailforia, I got them here. So like I said, so we started with our main character because like I said, the main character is our vessel for the theme. So let me write that. Main character equals the vessel. I'll say, yeah, let me say vessel for theme. Okay. So always start with like your main character. So if we're gonna sit here, we're gonna like flesh out the main character, the vessel. For me, for my story and my character San, I knew that he had to have certain people in his life and his story to make sure that he got to the ending that he needed to have, which is, like I said, that peaceful ending where he's no longer suffering from PTSD, he's no longer an alcoholic, and he loves himself and he's able to love others, right? And he's able to heal and things like that. So I knew that there's certain people that he needed to have in his life. So the only vessel I'm thinking is Sukuna. Okay. So obviously, because I said already that he's gonna have an ex and he's gonna have a daughter, those are already two people that he's gonna have to have. So he has Gia and he has Songmei. Songmei is his daughter. You won't know that right now in the story, but there you go. There's a spoiler for you. So he already has these two characters here. Now, when I was thinking about like where his story should go, I already had a few specific scenes in mind, right? So like at least the way that I do things, this is where the plot comes in. I knew that I had some specific scenes in mind, right? I was like, I know that he was gonna meet Gia, right? He was gonna like reunite with Gia. This is what's in episode 2. He's gonna reunite with Gia. That was super important. That had to happen. I also knew that, okay, I'm like trying not to give spoilers. I also knew that he was going to meet his daughter, right? That we can kind of just get over that part of it. He's gonna eventually meet his daughter, right? Um, so these were two pretty important plot points that I knew had to happen. My phone's about to die, but please, can you do a video of this, please? Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I might even just throw this up on YouTube, honestly, because I've kind of gone into like a lot, so I don't know if I'm gonna remember exactly what I say here if I don't just like record the video and put it on YouTube, but I will eventually have like a whole separate YouTube channel and TikTok and everything where I do talk about things like this. I'm just like super busy right now trying to just get through the the launch here. So I'm thinking probably in July I'll do more videos and things on this stuff because I really enjoy talking about it and helping people. So follow me here, and then eventually I'll start to talk about that kind of stuff. How to follow me on my other channels and things. So anyway, so like I said, there might be like certain things that you already think about. So like another thing that's kind of a spoiler, but we're going to talk about it, is that he's going to eventually also meet his brother. Right? So he has a brother. He has an older brother. He's like 10 years older than him. He's going to meet his brother, and he's also, I'm trying to think of what's not a spoiler. He's also going to okay, that's it. That's all I can really say. So just from these couple things that I knew had to happen and that I wanted to have happen, I took them and I started just brainstorming even more. What else could happen? So I'm gonna put this over here. So just based on like, let's do the Gia thing, like reunite with Gia. So this is where you can kind of get into your writer's mind. And for this plot point, you can sit and you can think about all the different things that could happen with him reuniting with, or, well, this is for me, speaking for myself. I would think of all the different things that I want to have happen where he was reunited with Gia. And that's where I got into, like I said, my writer's brain, and I was like, okay, this scene could happen, this scene could happen, this scene could happen. But the way that I come up with scenes is I think about the genre that I'm in, which is romance. I'm in romance drama. You're in action drama, so you would think about all the different action stories you've read, the different drama stories you've read. And then I also think about the tropes in the genre that I'm in. So I consider the tropes like in the romance and the drama category. So for me, you'd have to think about what it is for your story, like things that you've read, things that you know you want. But for me, some tropey things are like, the female lead tripping and falling, and then he, catches her, like that ML catches her, right? That's like a pretty tropey thing to have happen. Usually there's like, I don't know. I mean, you have like the meet cute and things like that. That's in romance. That's like when they first meet. There's a lot of different kind of like tropey things that people reading romance would sort of not like expect, but also like won't be mad if it's in there. Do you know what I mean? Because like romance, it's like we kind of are here for a reason, right? um, for action and drama, you can think about like what that might be. Like, I don't really know much about action, but you can think about like what are some things that action readers usually love to read about, or like what are some things that action, comics typically always have. And another way you can kind of figure this out is, or okay, I was going to speak for romance, but I guess for action, it would be kind of like the hero's journey. It really depends on your story, obviously, the different plot structure that you want to use. But like for romance, I used the romancing the beat plot structure as like a loose plot structure. Um, I guess one that works really well for action could be the hero's journey. I also use aspects of the hero's journey for Son's character just because of who he is. He's a man, and there was certain things in the hero's journey that sort of helped me to bring out his character arc. Um, but typically, I think like in action stories, like the hero's journey is probably pretty popular to use. It's a circular plot structure. It has all these different kind of things that have to happen in it, or are typical to happen in it. So when we think of like these scenes, this is for scene development, right? Which is part of plot development. We think about different scenes or different things that we want to see happen. We think about genre, which genre we're in. We think about tropes and different things that typically happen. And to find the tropes, we can usually look at the plot structures of the genre that we're in. Let me know if you're following in the comments. Let me know if you're tracking what I'm saying here. Because I'm gonna go a little bit deeper. For my story specifically with romance, the plot structure that I mentioned was the romancing the beat that I used. If you write romance, this is one that I highly suggest. It's a 4-act beat or plot structure. This is going to break down pretty much everything that you need to know of how the story should go. And it's going to also have these different moments. And I call some scenes moments or beats, right? They're going to be like specific moments that should happen in a story. So, for instance, in romance, there's going to be the meet cute. That's in every romance. It's like impossible to is that a little bit better? It's like impossible to have a romance without a meet cute. It's almost like in the DNA of a romance story. For an action story, I could probably say that like the call to action, which is in the hero's journey, is almost essential for an action story. Even though the call to action like sort of always kind of comes up in some aspect of a story. Specifically for action, it's critical. If you think about like I don't know where you live at, but like if you think about like Star Wars, Luke Skywalker getting called to become like a Jedi. However that happened, I forget how that happened, but whatever it was that was his call to action to make the decision to step out of his world on Tatooine into the rest of the Star Wars universe is like that moment that happens for action in the hero's journey. It's called call to action. So it's well, this isn't the moment, but like it's something that is going to well actually the call to action in that movie was when he got that message from I think oh shit, what's the girl's name, his sister Leia, when he got that message from Leia, and she was like, oh, like Ben Kenobi, like, can you help me or whatever it was. It was like that moment. So that's called a call to action, or whatever. And then whatever that scene was, I mean, but it's called a call to action and whatever that scene was. And then another thing in Hero's Journey would be like the point of no return, um, which I think is sometime after the call to action, I think, on this like wheel right here. The point of no return would be something very specific to action because it's the moment you see the person in the action story like not be able to go back to their previous life. There's no way they can go back. They've already been called to act and they've made the decision to go forward, or something forced them or pushed them into this point of no return, this like new phase in their wheel journey here. Okay, so like in my story with romance, like I said, there's meet cute. There's also like the breakup. Like obviously that has to happen, or like in some stories that has to happen. Most stories like don't have to follow it. Like sometimes there's not a third act breakup. And then obviously there's a happy ever after. That's like clear romance, right? Sometimes, like I said, sometimes there isn't a breakup. And sometimes there isn't even a happy ever after. Sometimes there's like I'm not gonna say like a tragedy, but sometimes it's just kind of like, you know, it has some other kind of ending. Like I think in Dear John, a movie by Nicholas Sparks, I think that's not really a happy ever after, because I think she ends up still marrying the other guy, and John ends up like having to just accept that she moved on after him. So it's not even like a happy ever after. But it's not necessarily a tragedy because nobody like dies or anything like tragic happens. It's just not a happy ever after. So these are typically kind of things that you should think about. These are called beats, or like specific moments, I call them, or anything that could then become a scene. Because if you think about like, oh, I need a meet cute or I need a call to action, well, you're gonna end up needing a scene to embody this beat, right? So that's why I put all this under scene development. Once you know these kind of like moments that you want to have happen, that have to have, or moments that you want to have happen, or that you know will happen for that character development that I was talking about, because that character needs to go through something to push the story into the beginning, middle, and end that has to do with that theme. Do you see how like everything kind of like I'm not crazy? Like I have a point I'm going with here, but do you see how like I kind of like brought it all back, and how you kind of like keep breaking it down and breaking it down? It's so much. This took me like years to even just understand, to be able to even like speak to you about it. It took me years of being able to like read books, watch, different videos, apply a lot of this stuff, because like a lot of it initially was like, um hi, how are you, to me, to him. So a lot of this is just a matter of like truly understand this kind of stuff, you have to just apply it. You have to write. And a lot of people that I, talk to and work with, like some of the issues that come up are that they're just not applying the things that they're learning. So definitely learn as much as you can, and then really try to sit back and sit in that writer's mind and see what kind of things come up for you when you kind of like sit and you think about the story. Um, so that's a little bit about the like how to kind of come up with these things. But I want to go back to character development because I just think this is really important. So I'm going to make this even smaller if I can and move it over there. Let's go even a little bit smaller. And this part I'm going to make even smaller over here. And I want to talk a little bit more about character development. Because as you know, there's multiple characters in a story, right? So let's just kind of go over that a little bit more, and how the other characters in the story can affect the main character, because we're really focusing on like the main character, right? Because like I said, the main character is like the vessel of the story, or the message of the story. So let's kind of go through that a little bit. So I would have to look it up to know exactly what they're called, because there are certain names for these types of characters that will come up for your story and for your character. There's like specific names, but I'm just gonna kind of give you an idea of the things that I did for my story. So remember how I said that, there's certain people that have to be in his life, right? We talked about who he directly needs to have that are going to be directly impacting him, who are Gia, his ex, right? And then Song Mei, who's his daughter. Those two characters have to, have to be there. Okay? But there's going to be other characters that are going to help San or hinder San on his journey. So if we think of his little journey like this is the end, this is the beginning, this is the middle. And he's going to go through this journey. He's always going to have Jian and Song Mei kind of like somewhere along this line. But there's going to be people that are going to help him get to the end. And there's going to be people that are going to like maybe indirectly, maybe directly be trying to stop him from getting to the end, which again is that peace, right? For his character, it's just inner peace, and it's just like peace in his life. So I had to think about that. I had to think about my character San. I had to think about, well, who in his life would be helping him to get to where he needs on his character arc. Well, I knew that, like I said, I knew he had a brother. His brother's name's Hyunjin. And then I had to sit there and think, is Hyunjin hindering San from getting to peace, or is he helping San? And I would say that Hyunjin is hindering San. Now, I say that because him and his brother have opposite views on certain situations, and specifically about their father. I'll give you like a little backstory of my character, which is also things that you can think about like when you go through this process. I had to know a lot about my character before I even knew, obviously, that he had a brother. I had to really like think about like, who is San, what is his situation, right? So in me doing that and coming up with his background and his backstory, I figured out that he had a brother, right? So in that, San and Hyunjin, 10 years apart, right? Hyunjin's older. Their father was very abusive, was very toxic. San was too young to understand. Hyunjin was old enough to understand. So I already understood that they have conflicting views on their family life. And because San, right, his journey, is to learn how to be a father, learn how to sort of like cope with his own past. That's why Hyunjin and his relationship is important to Son in the story. Because Hyunjin, because Son has a specific view on fatherhood that stems from his relationship with his brother when they were younger and his family. So I know that Hyunjin is going to be an important character to him, and he's going to be hindering him because Hyunjin has a certain view, Son has an opposing view, and so they're going to have, arguments and stuff about that. But I also know that they're going to have their own arc as well, where eventually they're going to have peace. So eventually they're going to kind of like, and that's okay, obviously a little bit of a spoiler, but eventually they're going to come together. They're going to finally be okay. Okay, so this is Son's, and then this is Son and Hyunjin. They're going to get to peace. Just like Jia and Sangmei and Son are also going to get to peace. I had to think about another character. Who else would be helping or hindering Son? Well, you have Jia's husband. Jia's husband is going to be hindering Son from getting to where he wants to be at, which is peace. And I had to think about all the ways that he could possibly be hindering Son. Just the fact that he's Jia's husband is one big way that he's going to be hindering Son from getting to peace. Because if you remember from the theme, Son's whole thing is that he has to learn how to love himself and others and appreciate life through the unconditional love of Jia and his daughter Sangmei. He can't do that if Jia is still attached to Young-ho, right? Right. So he's going to be, his presence in the story for Son is going to be hindering. Somebody that's going to be helpful to Son is going to be Ha-jun. Ha-jun, if you read the story, is Son's assistant. He's going to be helpful. Ha-jun is also a father. Unlike, and having contrasts and things in your story is also really important when it comes to characters. Hyunjin is a father, but he hinders Son. Ha-jun is a father and he helps Son, right? So now Son has two people in his life that are going to be giving him two different perspectives on the same situation, fatherhood. Hyunjin believes that things need to be a certain way. Ha-jun understands more of the compassionate side of fatherhood and what that means. So Ha-jun is going to be more compassionate to Son. Hyunjin is going to be more oppressive to Son. So because he had Hyunjin as a father hindering him, it was important to have somebody that could be helpful to him on his journey to fatherhood. And that's where Ha-jun's character role comes into for Son's character. On the fatherhood side, right? For fatherhood. So this is like Young-ho is about like the romance. Hyunjin is fatherhood. Ha-jun is fatherhood. Another person that's going to be helpful to Son is So-yoon. So let's see, how could I describe this? So So-yoon is Jia's best friend. And So-yoon is also a mother. But she's not going to be like helping him too much with like the motherhood side of things. She's also going to be helping him with the romance. Right? So like how Young-ho is hindering him with romance, So-yoon's going to be helping him with with the romance side. And she's going to be helpful because she's obviously Jia's friend. So she knows Jia very well. And she's going to be able to sort of vouch for their relationship, Son and Jia's relationship, and also eventually sort of help Son understand Jia more deeply through some of the situations that happen. She's going to sort of challenge Son, where Son might be like, oh, like, I can't be with Jia. She's gonna be like, shut the fuck up and grow a set of balls. Like, that's kind of like her her role, right? So yeah, so if that makes sense. Young Ho's hindering him from being with Jia, So Yoon's gonna sort of help to enlighten him to realize that he needs to be with Jia. If that makes sense, do you see? So do you kind of like see what I'm doing here? So it's like going, like I'm always thinking back to this main theme. Whoops, that was like really big. This main theme right here. This main character that has this theme as the or he's the vessel for that theme. Like obviously two of the bigger themes here were being a father and obviously the love. Those were both things in my message. So I had to think of characters that could propel him or like hold him back from that goal, right? That end of the story. Okay. This is like this is very in depth, by the way. So like your story might not need, depending on like the type of story that you were writing. Obviously, like I said, mine's a romance, so I can only speak to like what I'm doing right now. Unless I was like working with you one on one or something like that, then I could really go more into yours. But I'm just kind of showing you what I do for mine. This is so super, super in depth. Like, I don't really even know if people do this or not. I know that I do this based on all of the research and things that I've done, and this is how I've learned to apply it. Which really gives me like a really rich story with a lot of depth, doing this kind of like deep character development. But it just depends on how you do your story. If you might not need all this, but considering these things, and also keep in mind that my story is specifically there's so much that's going on into my story. There's a lot of different things that I'm juggling and balancing, so I need a lot of characters and a lot of plot points and things to sort of make sure everything sort of is cohesive. So just keep that in mind. A lot of stories can be a lot more simple, and I have other stories that are really simple. There's like three main characters and that's it. But this story in particular, since I'm talking about it, I'm writing it, and this is the comic that you're kind of like talking to me on and stuff like that, this is kind of like what I'm going to. I'm so glad this is helpful. I'm so glad. Um, so yeah, I'll keep it there. There's like a ton of characters, there's a ton of things going on, but I'll keep it to that kind of simply. And then I also just want to visually show you sort of like what I do when I sort of think about this. Because that might be kind of confusing, right? So one of the things that I do is I try to visualize these character dynamics, sort of like what I call it, on like a line, right? So we have one line, two line, three line. So we have like Son and Jia, right? This is their character sort of dynamic through the story. And this is how you can start to match up. Remember how I said plot and character development are not the same, but they kind of go hand in hand? This is where you can start to look at that. Now we kind of went through our main character. You would do this for every character, by the way, but we went through our main character and saw like what his goal was, where he's going to end up on the end of the story, and like who he might need that could help him, hinder him. Now we're going to look through his dynamics with each character. So San and Jia, right? They have beginning, middle, and end of their character arc. We would have San and Young Ho. We would have San and So Yoon. We would have San and Sang Mei, right? We would have San and Hyun Jun, like that. So we would do this for every single character. And through the story, we would be thinking about, okay, not only like the different scenes that I said based on the tropes, like the meet cute and things. So like obviously with San and Jia, they'd have to have like a meet cute. At some point, they probably are going to have like a breakup, and then eventually they're going to have a happy ever after. Right, so it's like they have these moments here. But then I can start thinking about like, okay, well, for San and Jia, I know that there's going to be like, you know, obviously some rough spots, probably more in the beginning, right? versus like the middle. Like maybe the middle is more like according to the Romancing the Plot B act, which has the 4-act structure and it tells you exactly what would happen. I would know probably here is more of like the honeymoon phase, like they're probably actually together or something. Then this is like the breakup, and something bad has to happen here. So you see how I'm looking at it from like a character perspective, but this is like the plot arc. So now I know the middle of the story is going to be maybe like good, but then something bad has to happen. Well, I'm also looking at Son and Young Ho's situation too. So if I know something bad happens between Son and Gia around this part of the story, like the third act, if this is first act, second act, third act, or first act, second act, third act, fourth act. So first, second, third, fourth. So around like the third act here, something bad's gonna happen. Then I can start thinking about, well, where's Young Ho at this point? How is Young Ho playing into that being a bad situation? And I can't say much right now, but that's how I would have to think about it. I would have to be like, okay, well, where's Young Ho? How is he contributing to this being a bad situation? Because as you know, Young Ho has to hinder Son from getting to his goal at the end of the story. Do you understand? Are you following me still? Now I can think of Son and Soyun. If I know that this part is really rocky, and I know that Soyun is supposed to be helpful to Son, what kind of interactions, what kind of situations might happen between Son and Soyun in the beginning of the story, knowing that this part of the story for Son and Gia is supposed to be rocky, and Soyun is her friend? Well, I could probably see Son and Soyun not being on the same page. Because I also know that in the beginning of the story, Son has to be, in his own arc, avoidant. Do you remember what I said about that back at the beginning? Wow, way back up here somewhere. Where is it? Where is it? Oh, it's over here. Remember I said Son is avoiding his past? He has PTSD and he's an alcoholic. We already established that. So I know in the beginning of the story, he's going to be avoidant. He's going to have problems. He's not going to want to deal with Gia. Gia and Soyun are friends. So obviously if San is acting a certain way that goes against her friend, San and Soyun might not be on the same page here. How do you think their relationship might change once San and Gia are actually together? Well, Soyun might be okay with that. Now maybe San and Soyun are doing okay. What about when they break up? Do you think Soyun would be happy with San if San broke up with Gia? Probably not. So then probably in the third act, San and Soyun are not going to be okay. What about at the end of the story? If San and Gia ended up together, do you think that Soyun would be happy? Do you think that like if they got married in the happy ever after, Soyun would be like at that wedding? Most likely. So then here they might be okay. So do you see how like I just came up with like some scenarios and then I thought about San and Soyun? So now I can think of like some scenes here that could go along with these beats. They're bad, they're good, they're bad, they're good. And that's how you fill out the middle of your story. So remember how I said the middle of the story is always the hardest? Right? It's empty. This is how you do that. This is how you fill out the middle of the story. You figure out your main character, their opposing and helpful sources in other character roles. And then you see on each of these timelines where that main character is in connection to these other characters. Let me know if this makes sense. Let me know if you're still with me. Hey, what's up on YouTube? So then let's do it for San and Hyunjin, since I kind of talked about them before, right? So remember Hyunjin is San's brother. He's supposed to hinder him in the story. Well, San is avoidant in the beginning of the story. He doesn't want to deal with anything. He doesn't want to deal with anybody or anything to do with his past. Is Hyunjun in his past? Yes. So he's not going to have anything to do with Hyunjun in the beginning of the story. So when I looked at the plot arc, I said, well, Hyunjun isn't even going to come in until, this is like spoilers, by the way. Hyunjun isn't even going to come in until season 2. So like the middle of the story, right? This is like the first act, second act, third act, fourth act. So Hyunjun isn't even in the story here. He's going to be here in the second act or the second season, right? Which is sort of like the second act starts in the second season. Okay, so I know that for sure because San is avoidant, so he has nothing to do with Hyunjin here. Now, remember I said Hyunjin is hindering. When Hyunjin does come into the story, do you think that he's going to be like, San's going to be like happy to see Hyunjin? No, no, he's not going to be happy. So knowing that beat, right, that like emotional beat, I'm going to know the kind of vibe of the scenes that I need for this part of the story with Hyunjun. It's not going to be a good reunion, right? The same way that when San in this first couple episodes reunited with Gia, he's avoidant. He meets Gia. It's not a happy reunion. Okay? So knowing that, I know the type of vibe, the type of emotional beat that these two characters have to have here in the story. So the same way that, even though, San and Gia at this point in the story might be doing okay because they got through their shit, San still has to deal with his brother. So now, do you see how it's like, okay, well, they're happy. Well, here's a conflict. Here's another conflict for San. He's not done yet. He's not to the happy peace yet because he still has to get through this part. Because remember, San is on that journey of not only love, but also fatherhood. So this is what I mean by like complex sort of character and plot development and how this story is really complex. Because while I have San on one hand doing well romantically, he also has to deal with the negative stuff from the fatherhood stuff now. This next part here is going to be him dealing with fatherhood. So he dealt with romance in season 1 and sort of part of season 2. Part of season 2 into season 3 is now going to be addressing this part. Are you tracking? Kind of makes sense? This is 2 types of themes that I'm dealing with here. Now, because he's dealing with fatherhood, this is where Song-Mei is going to come in. Remember Song-Mei over here? She's important to the theme, to the character, right, to San's character. So she has to have her own line with San. Now, again, because San is avoidant, he's not going to have anything to do with Song-Mei in the first part. Song-Mei isn't going to come into his life until the second season. Super spoiler, sorry guys. But this is the only way I can sort of explain this. So this is when he's going to really start to understand who Song-Mei is, and they're going to kind of get through that part of the story, right? Because that's the fatherhood side of his character arc journey. Does that make sense? Kind of get it? So we went through Gia, Young-ho, and So-yoon. We're all sort of the romantic part, right? Song-Mei and Hyunjun were more the fatherhood side of his character. So you see how incorporating side characters can really flesh out your main character? So in the middle of the story, now it's not just, at least for my story, like I said, everybody's story is different, but at least in my story, it's not going to be boring or bland or anything. There's going to be lots of different people that he's going to be interacting with, even outside of Gia, that are going to help him get closer to Gia and get closer to that peace that his character really truly needs. Now, in a regular romance story, it's usually not this complex. There's usually not so many side characters and things like that. But this isn't a regular romance story. This is a male, you know, point of view romance story. So I really wanted to focus on the healing journey that he goes through, with romance really just sort of as the foundation, but focusing really on this fatherhood piece, um, because it's directly related to Gia, obviously, like I said, because he is, the father of her child, but it's really focused on his self healing, self love through learning he's a father because he doesn't know he's a father. So, just a little spoiler. Just I'm gonna kind of like go into his character a little bit more, which is stuff like I said. When you really flesh out your characters, you free write, you kind of like think about who your characters are and everything. For San, when I developed his character before I even developed a lot of this stuff, I knew that I really wanted, like I said, really wanted to focus on this fatherhood piece. And the way that I found the inspiration for those things was by looking in my own life. So I always advocate for like going deep into your own life to pull out some of these kind of like core theme type of like experiences and situations that can help drive your characters and make them feel more real. Because you know how people always talk about that? They're always like, how do you make characters feel real? Like, how do I make my characters feel real? In my opinion, the way that you make characters feel real is by giving them pieces of yourself or pieces of other people that you know. The experiences that, you know, that you're able to um, understand and then convey uh, to other people, right? So I understand, you know, parenthood and things like that, parenting. But what I really wanted to kind of like explore in the story was the idea of somebody who is so lost. Speaking about San right here, somebody who's so lost, who's so who is dealing with so much pain and guilt and survivor's guilt and just guilt and regret in general. That's like the PTSD side that he has, right? And hopelessness that um, sort of bordering on the line of exploring self exiting, if you feel me, like bordering on that. I'm not totally going into that with San, but I'm like bordering on the ideas of that, and what that means in like real life. Somebody who's dealing with that and exploring what could really drive somebody back to being grounded in life, right? So, like, this is coming from my brother self exiting and really having to sit with that for many years and process through that and understand the grief and everything that comes with that. And wondering myself, like, he has two children that he left, and wondering what it might be like for somebody to be feeling those kind of emotions. Like I said, this isn't exactly Sanjin, like he's not exactly a self-exiter, but he's an alcoholic, right? So dealing with so much pain that wondering, and I'm wondering like what might it be, what might it take for somebody to sort of stay, if you understand what I'm saying. So, like I said, back to the theme of what I was saying for San's character, this unconditional love that he gets from his ex fiance and his daughter, and all these experiences that he has with all these characters, especially the helpful ones, are going to be able to help him in staying, if you know what I'm saying. So he is going to learn that his life is valuable and he has importance, or like an important journey, that's not only for himself but it's also for his daughter. So like the whole story really centers around Song Mei in that aspect. So by the end of the story, you're gonna really see him sort of like step up for Song Mei and step into that role of like a protector, of realizing that even though he wasn't, I'm like spoiling so much of my story now. Even though he wasn't able to save Taeyong, he's able to save Song Mei and to feel purpose in life. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, um, taking, and I see your comment, I appreciate it. And yeah, it's hard. I'm sorry for your loss as well. Um, so if you understand what I'm saying, like taking from these really vulnerable places, whether it's within yourself or people you know, or you're observing relationships that you have or relationships you see with other people, and really breaking those down to like the core emotions of what it is, will really help you to be able to be inspired, or you can use directly, so it's like indirectly or directly, be inspired to create these kind of emotions, like these deep emotions and deep wounds and deep character arcs that have a lot of emotion and depth. And that's how you make characters feel really real, right? That's how you do it. So if anybody asks you, how do I make my characters feel real? Tell them to take from real life situations, real life experiences, and really understanding like the depth of emotion that comes with those experiences. Because as writers and storytellers, that's really all we're doing, is breaking down situations into emotional beats or emotions, and sort of wrapping those up in a way that we can convey it to somebody else, and so they can experience it maybe in a different way or interpret it in their own way, right? Are you feeling me? Are you following me? Sorry to go there for a second, but um that's really what we're doing here. Like at the core of everything, like we want to make these stories. You know, I have my comic and I have all these fun videos and things like that on this, you know, on the surface of what this is, but this is truly the deep depth of where the story is, and where I break down the story so intensely for myself to fully understand in and out of what I'm doing. It's gonna help me be able to create content, and not only content like on social media, but like create the story content that not only can be really relatable to people and people really have emotional reactions to the story and the characters and their decisions and the actions that they take in the story, but it's really going to help me be able to make it lighter and find places where it's palatable. So like obviously right now, like none of this is on my social media page, right? Like you guys don't know any of the stuff that's really going on. I don't think I've even told you guys that he is the father. But yet we have like 20,000 people here, and you know, we're having a good time and people enjoy the story. And essentially that's the purpose. It's like I want you guys to enjoy the story, but at the end of the story, I want there to be some sort of like emotional impact that the story had in whatever way that the reader experienced it. Um, but in my story, because I like to write sort of very suspenseful stories, my intention with the story, the way that I foreshadow, the way that I use a lot of like what's called literary devices, the way I build the story through symbolism and things like that, um, that all helps to the experience of the story. But I want to create a very intentional story that requires a reader to have to read it again, right? And I appreciate it, TT, thank you. Um, but I want to create a very like also like I said, impactful story, but something that really is going to be memorable. Like you're going to have all these emotional, like whether it's happy or sad or whatever it is, but to the point where also using those literary devices, like I said, symbolism, foreshadowing stuff, gonna have to make you read the story again. And that's how you create a very pervasive story, whether it's action or drama or like whatever it is. Um, Something that people want to come back to. They want to be like immersed in your story again because it's so impactful to them in some way, whether, like I said, it's happiness or joy or whatever emotional thing that you're trying to drive for them. Let me know if you feel me. Let me know if you're following. So I bet you weren't expecting all that when you asked me these questions, but just know that my approach to writing in the space that I found through talking to many creators and other writers and things is very, very, very different. It's a very different approach than other people. I'll just say that. I'm not comparing or anything. I'm not saying that mine's better or not as good or something like that. I'm just saying that my approach is very different. I take a very emotional, obviously in-depth approach to creating story. And even in some of like the smaller stories that I have, like the short stories and things, when it comes to writing like shorter stories, like this story that I'm talking about is very, very big. Lots of characters, lots of moving parts, as you can see, lots of plot arcs. But when it comes to short story, um, I love this that my English teacher told me one semester, but I think it applies to even like regular stories. But we were in a specifically the class was for short stories. But he was saying to use everything. Like if something is being shown or said or done in a story, you're going to have it make you're gonna have it make sense. It's gonna have purpose. It's gonna be very intentional. Nothing is going to waste. It is all very intentional. And I agree with him, and I think the same thing for even a bigger story, especially for a bigger story, because it's so big and it takes a long time. Like, still, things should be very impactful and intentional. But if your story is like a shorter story, 100%, all the meat should be used on the bone. Nothing should be filler, nothing should be unintentional. And that's where you can use a lot of, like I said, what's called literary devices. And I love foreshadowing. Like, I don't know if you guys were on earlier. I've been on live like all day. But earlier I went into like this whole entire breakdown, like breakdown analysis of my episode 1 and my episode 4 and talking about all the foreshadowing, not even all of it, just like what I could say on live that wasn't spoiling too much. But the literary devices I use, literary devices like the symbolism and the foreshadowing and the suspense and the dialogue and the placement of like the stuff in the panels and things like that, the visual storytelling and things. I love that kind of stuff because I want to make sure that in especially like a visual format, like a visual media, we're using all the meat on the bone. We're using the dialogue, making sure that's super impactful. We're also making sure the visuals are very impactful. We're making sure that the symbolism and the foreshadowing is there too. If there's anything that needs to be shown or set up, we're making sure that that's there. Because obviously visual mediums are way different than written mediums, and we can do a lot more with the visuals because you have that extra like added sensory experience there. So using all the meat on the bones, even like I said, if it's short story, long story, just want to clarify that. But I genuinely love this so much, and I've asked many artists to explain this to me, and you're the one, and you're literally the only one I fully understand explaining this so far. I'm so happy to hear that. I'm so glad that I've been able to help you with this, and this has also been really fun for me to like really, you know, understand my process, because like I know my process, but this is really one of the first times that I've like really kind of connected at all to somebody else. So this has been really fun for me, and I'm definitely gonna probably snip this part of my video and I'll try to post it on my YouTube or something. So hopefully other people can. I mean, they're gonna get like a lot of spoilers in my story, but at least hopefully if it can help somebody else, then that'd be great. But Yeah, I mean, so wow, I covered so much. Um, I'll just add these here if you want to like take a picture or whatever. These are two that I really, really focus on. There's a lot of different literary devices, but like I said, I use foreshadowing and symbolism heavily in my story. Um, you don't have to or anything like that, but these are just two things that I focus on um, to really give that depth. And another little tidbit of information is just that because it's a visual medium, and especially in a comic space, I found that people tend to forget very quickly what's been shown to them. So I'm gonna take a break from writing and stuff. I want to show you now kind of like what I've been talking about, and I'll go through if you want me to, if you have to go or something. But I'll go through my episode 4 and 1. Um, Partly because I just love talking about it, but also it actually has to do with what I was just talking about. So I can like visually show you how I use some of these literary devices. Let me know if that's okay or if you have to go or whatever. Um, all good. I'm gonna take some water. You're good? All right, cool. So let's go through it. I love talking about this. Hold on a second. Okay. You're sad. Okay, I love it. Let's do it. I'm rolling up my sleeves. Let's go. All right. So, have you read the story? Whoops. Just so I can have an idea. It's okay if you haven't. Bob, put the AC on. Okay, no problem. So, I kind of like broke down my whole entire story anyway to you guys. But hopefully, I mean, you guys specifically, there's like 2 or 3 people on this live, so that's kind of why I was like ranting a lot about all these spoilers. But if you guys read the story now, you might have a way different perspective on it than some of the other people that read the story, because I really like sort of told you a lot of like what's going on. But it'll be kind of interesting if you guys do take the time to read it. If you want to like send me a DM or something on Instagram and just let me know if it came off a certain way to you now that you have all this like extra information, extra context about like who San is as a character, what his actual journey is gonna be. And I'd be super interested to know how that affects your reading experience and kind of like what more you took from the story. Just kind of like as like I'm a marketer, so for me I'm just like super curious about like how that might have affected your like you differently than other people. But besides that, awesome. Thanks for following me. Besides that, let's sort of like talk about it. But let me hold on, let me get my son again. Bob, I said put the AC on. Okay, so you guys haven't read the story. So let's do, how did I do this before? Should I do episode 1? Hold on, let me just think for a second how I want to go through. Let me go through the way that you would read it. I'm gonna go through episode 1 first, so you can see. The art alone will get me to read. Awesome, I love it. I have an amazing artist that I work with, so I'm very fortunate. So this is the beginning of episode 1. So, you know, you might scroll past this very quickly, but if you know the title of the story and you know me now as a writer, very, very symbolic with the birds here. We're starting strong with the symbolism. So, you know, from the get go, the story is about birds, and the birds are going to have a very important role So I'll say though, for since we're like talking about writing and things like that, and just my choice of different visuals and things, because I know that birds are a huge symbol in the story. Obviously, I'm going to start the story with birds. Yes, and also just what he talks about and like what the symbolism of the birds mean also have a connection. But here he's talking about death. He's talking about facing death. And basically, the monologue that he goes through is to do with the theme that we talked about, right? So, San's whole arc, if you remember, has to do with appreciating life and finally realizing the purpose of his life. And remember, I talked about how he's sort of symbolic. His character is symbolic of a person who is borderline self-exiter. So obviously for his character, it was very important that I start the story with him talking about his point of view of what life is like for him, right? It's like what the meaning of life is for him. And just so you understand, if you go to read the story now, this is him in the future talking about this moment in his past. So this isn't his active thoughts as we scroll through. This is like him far in the future reflecting on this moment, where he basically almost died, right? So he's like, you spend your whole life chasing success, wealth, and power, but when you're staring death in the face, none of it matters. All of it just fades into the background. So you have a very strong idea of what his idea of life and death means, right? He's a wealthy CEO here. He's spent the last 7 years building himself up. If you read the synopsis, you'd also know that he kind of had like a rags to riches story. So that's also kind of like where this is coming from. Then he goes into a little bit of Gia and stuff like that. But what I'm trying to show you here in episode 1 is this right here. He's on the ground. He's in this brown trench coat thing. And he's dying, right? He just got hit by a car. He says between life and death, he's dying. He is not doing very well. Okay, so going from there, I want to show you that it goes 2 weeks into the future, and he meets Gia, blah blah blah, stuff happens. But then we get to episode 4, Ablaze. Okay. What I was kind of showing earlier was that the way that I wrote this was like, I wanted to obviously show that beginning of the story. That's how I wanted to open the story. It's how I knew I kind of always wanted to open the story. But I needed to circle back to that. And when we were doing the webtoon contest, I only had 3 episodes. But this episode 4 and episode 5 were still part of the first 3 episodes, but we just didn't get to them. So this is all supposed to be like one big sequence between what I just showed you in episode 1.
What are you doing?
And then also when we get to the end of episode 5. This episode here is not only a flashback, but it's also a dream sequence. So you're gonna come into this episode not really knowing if it's the present or the past or whatever. If you see his outfit, you'll recognize it from episode 1. So if you are sort of paying attention, then you might recognize his outfit, and then you would know that it's a flashback or it's something that happened in the past. And if you kind of are connecting the dots here, and especially for you guys, because now you guys know his character, right? And he's an alcoholic, so he's drinking heavily here. As you can see, he's an alcoholic, he's drinking heavily, he's very drunk, right? So this is in the past, and he's very drunk. So once we get through this, you'll start to understand that this is actually not only a flashback, but it's also a dream sequence, because he's gonna go through this situation. There's a lot of like symbolism and things going on here, but I'm just gonna skip ahead a little bit. when we get to the end here, it circles back. So it's the beginning of episode 1. If you guys feel me of how that went. Just to kind of like quickly summarize it, but the couple things I wanted to show you here were this. So everything being like super intentional. The snow is also really symbolic in this episode. It's winter anyway when he's there, but the snow also has a purpose here. We have Taeyong, that's the brother. And then the other thing here, the blood here is also very symbolic. Blood, and then there's no blood. So a lot of small details that you aren't going to understand until much later in the story. But some of the things you can start to see now. Like I said, like the birds, literally just the fact that they're there, you should know that something about the scene is important, or it's like off or something. Now, if you remember those birds in the beginning of the episode, the first episode, and he was dying, right? There's birds again, kind of emphasized in this scene, and now we're seeing his dead friend, right? So the birds have something to do with death, is like what I'm saying. The birds, if you see the birds in any kind of like specific way, just know that there's something spiritual going on. There's something important going on. So I just wanted to kind of like talk about that episode 1 in the beginning, and then kind of like the sequence, just because like I said, for me as a writer, I'm very like, there's lots of layers. Like every single panel, there's like something. There's something super important going on, especially in scenes like this. Like this is a hugely important sequence that I'm showing here. Oh, is any of stories fully unlocked? I can't pay for them. Or do you any creators? No. So I mean, only episode 1 through 5 are free. And only the censored version of episode 5 is free, I think. And other than that, everything else is paid. I guess sort of unfortunately for some people, but at the same time, like, it's just to help us be able to create the comics still. I've said on every live that I've been on that it just helps to be able to support us. And if you can, it's like 60 cents an episode, really, once you kind of like break it down a little bit. So if you can't afford that or anything like that, then, you know, that's always an option. Otherwise, I come on here all the time and I'm always spoiling my story, so at least there's that, I guess. But yeah. So let me know if what I'm saying makes any sense, or if I'm just kind of like rambling and like it doesn't really have any purpose to anything. But when we were talking about like paneling earlier too, you can see somewhere like this is sort of how we storyboarded some of these scenes here. So because this was kind of like a sort of more intense scene, you can see there's a lot less empty space. And you know, like I said, you have like action drama. This would be more like dramatic, like for more of like a drama, like the drama side of it. There's a lot less empty space and a lot more longer connecting panels. And I did that intentionally because I wanted it to feel very like immersive and very like flowy and very continuous. So a lot of this stuff kind of just like flows together and it doesn't like feel very jumpy. So you can see how like we start from Taeyong, but then it kind of goes down, and then all of a sudden you see his face. So it feels very like bam, you know what I mean? And then it's like we see Son stepping, and then we see Taeyang, and he's got like this really long panel. So I imagine all this stuff in my head, and I'm like, okay, how do I want it to look? What are things I wanted to emphasize to, like, thinking about like the symbolism and the foreshadowing and things like that, the flashbacks that I know that I have in my scenes and things like that. Him having his hand out was super important, right? So everything that I try to do is very intentional, especially in scenes like this. So I'll just say that, like, when he dies, he reaches out to San in the same kind of way. So that's why I have it here, because when we get to that point in the story, I want you to be able to read this through again and see him do this. But now you'll have that context. Well, you have that context now, but when you read it and you finally get to that scene where you see him dying and he's reaching out for San, now you'll have that context of why he's reaching out to him here and how we see him here. Now, the blood on the hand, I love this because this is very symbolic. How did his friend die, if you don't mind spoiling? So he gets I'm trying to think of like how much I want to give away. But so he gets so they're on a mission, and he gets impaled, and because he's impaled, he can't move, and there's a fire. So he essentially burns alive. That's how he dies. So I'm only saying that because we were just talking about the fire, and I'm talking about symbolism. So this is why he's standing in fire, because he actually burned alive, right? He burned in a fire. That is going to be something that when you read it back, hopefully it has a different, deeper meaning to you once we get to that point and you get to see the actual sequence of how that happens for Taeyang. And hopefully this whole episode will make a lot more sense, that San was randomly having a PTSD moment of a fire, you know, and seeing his friend here. So that is how he dies. But I mean, even like I said, like the very like basic visual symbolism, like blood on your hands type of thing. This has obviously two different meanings. Like, obviously the blood, the physical blood that he had when Taeyang was dying. The double meaning here is also the guilt that he has from his friend dying, and he wasn't able to save him, so he has like blood on his hands, stuff like that. That's how I like to tell stories. Very visual, like kind of storytelling, very, some pretty obvious kind of symbolism, some more subtle things that you're gonna have to like wait to kind of figure out. But yeah, that's all I wanted to show just from those two episodes, and how I kind of use the literary devices to not only write the story but also like visually show things in the story too. And God, that's like we're like only on episode 4. So we're like on episode 4 of the whole series. So I'm making a story on Wattpad called Country Girl Turn County. Can't think of what to do with it. I'm making a story on Wattpad called, oh wait, what? Which one is it? Called City Girl Turn Country. Can't think of what to do with it. What do you mean? What do you mean by that? And that's all I had from the conversation we were talking about before. That was sort of like how I wanted to kind of wrap that up. So let me know, Summer and TT, if that was helpful. And hopefully you guys are able to download Lamoon and check out the story and let me know what you think. Thank you, Irisha, on YouTube. I appreciate it. Hey, Nezuko. But yeah, let me know what you mean, Malachi. Like, what do you mean by that? You don't know what to do with it. Like, how do you not know what to do with it? Like, what's the situation? Like, the first chapter, it's childhood friends to lovers story. Okay. Were you here at all when I was breaking down, like, how to write a story and how to kind of, like, develop the story? And, like, all my crazy notes that I wrote here? Were you here for any of this? Because I was telling Summer that before we even talk about first chapter stuff, we have to really go deep into the story and understand the story and what we're doing with it, what our message is, who the characters are, what their arcs are, what the plot development is going to look like, how the story is going to start, how it's going to really end for the vibes. So before we're even like, oh, like, what's the first chapter going to be like, we have to really, like, you have to, like, really go through, like, a lot of processes to get there. That's something I didn't talk about here, but the first episode of, well, if you're writing a story, it's a little bit different, but I'm speaking specifically about, well, I mean, even for novels too, the first chapter, the first episode is always usually the hardest, but I think with webtoons, it's a little bit even more tricky because, God, there's like so many ways you could start the story, and because it's a different type of release, it's like a serialized release, it's like a weekly episode release, we're creating story to hook and capture people and retain people's attention, whereas like a book, I think people are more lenient with a book because it's like, if you even have a book, there had to be some kind of interest in that book to begin with. So you're more likely to continue reading even if you didn't particularly like all of that chapter. Do you know what I mean? So like, but with a comic, because there's no additional context after the episode that we release, we have to really make sure that that's structured a certain way. It's very similar to I didn't say this earlier, but I'm gonna say it right now that writing comics, writing screenwriting, script writing, rather, for comics is very much similar to script writing for TV. This episodic serialization type of approach to storytelling, whereas novel writing is a lot different because you can kind of give somebody all of the content at the same time and they have more, like I said, more of an opportunity to sort of get through everything. However, if you're writing on Wattpad and you're doing a serialized release, you can kind of think of it similar to, you know, script writing for comics, but I'm not exactly too familiar with the novel episodic writing side of things, but I'm sure that you could probably think of it, like I said, the same kind of idea. But like I said, even then, like, the novel writing side is way different than the comic side. Like, comics, we're showing visuals, we're kind of like forced to get to the point a lot of the times, really condense things, whereas like you could have like a 30-page episode release for that week, and that's so much content you could get through. So I kind of rambled there for a second. I don't even remember what I was going to talk about here because I was like trying to process while I was talking, like, how they're different. What was I talking about though? I was talking about like script writing or something. I don't know. But one thing I will say though, like I said, is with the comic writing and things, it's easy to think about each of these episodes like TV. So there's like a certain way that it's structured in each episode. But what was I talking about though before that? Before I started going on about that, there was like something specific I was like about to go into. That's why I like pulled up this part right here. Because you said something like you were saying the first chapter, and I was like, oh, the first chapter is usually like the hardest. I don't remember what I was gonna say. Sorry about that. I don't know. Sometimes I like blink out and I just like ramble. I'm just like actively trying to like process information while I'm speaking. But yeah, let me know somebody like what I was talking about before I went on a rant. Hello, Lokita. On YouTube, what's up? This was like a college lecture session that we just went through. That was a lot. Let me know, Malachi, if you have like a specific question though, like about the process or something. Or anything like that. Otherwise, you guys can let me know like what else is going on. Okay, if nobody has anything else to say or ask, I'm going to probably stop this live and I'll restart another one just so I have not too long of a video when I have to go to edit it and things. But let me know if you have anything else. And I hope this was helpful, like I said before. Okay, I'm gonna stop the live and I'll restart it.